The conference call droned on about quarterly security assessments when I heard the front door open downstairs. I hit mute on my headset and leaned back in my desk chair, listening to familiar voices filter up through the floorboards of our split-level home in Millbrook, Massachusetts. Kira's family had arrived for their weekly Sunday dinner. Her mother, Raina's sharp voice cut through the murmur of greetings, followed by her brother Jared's deeper tone. I should have unmuted and rejoined the call, but something in their hushed conversation made me pause. "Just keep playing victim until you get the insurance settlement," Raina was saying. "He'll never suspect his own accident." My fingers froze over the keyboard. The quarterly reports on my screen blurred as those words sank in. His own accident. My accident. 8 months ago, Kira had been in what we called a terrible car crash. She'd spent 3 days in the hospital with a concussion, and the insurance company was still processing her claim for ongoing therapy and lost wages. But Raina wasn't talking about Kira's accident. She was talking about mine. An accident that hadn't happened yet. I pulled off my headset completely and crept to the top of the stairs. The conference call would have to manage without Cedric Fallon for a few minutes. "The timing has to be perfect," Jared was saying. "Drake's articles about the drone program are gaining traction. If Cedric gets implicated as the leak source, his credibility is shot. Then we trigger the crash." Drake, Kira's ex-boyfriend from college, the defense journalist who'd been writing exposés about military contractors. The same Drake who'd been asking pointed questions about my work in digital forensics for the Army Reserve. What if he survives? This was Kira's voice, and hearing her participate in this conversation felt like ice water flooding my chest cavity. "That's the beauty of it," Raina replied. "Traumatic brain injury, just like you faked. Conservatorship proceedings become much easier when the subject can't think straight." I gripped the stair railing. Faked. Kira had faked her injuries. "Brent's been feeding us his psychological evaluations for months," Jared continued. "We have documentation of increasing instability, social isolation, paranoid behavior. The narrative practically writes itself." Brent Marrow, my mentor from my active duty days, now a contractor who handled security clearances. The man who'd been checking on my mental state after Kira's accident, expressing concern about my adjustment issues and recommending I take time off from my consulting work. The man I'd trusted with my doubts about whether Kira was really as injured as she claimed. My phone buzzed with a text from my business partner asking where I'd gone on the call. I texted back that I had a family emergency and would rejoin tomorrow, then powered down my laptop. For the first time in months, the paranoid thoughts I'd been having suddenly seemed perfectly reasonable. The friends who'd stopped calling, the military contracts that had dried up, the way Kira's family looked at me during these Sunday dinners, like they were measuring me for something. They were measuring me for a coffin. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly ducked into our bedroom, closing the door softly. Kira appeared in the hallway, calling up to me. "Honey, dinner's ready. Mom made your favorite pot roast." My favorite. Right. Raina Favren had never made anything I particularly liked in the 8 years Kira and I had been married, but I was supposed to come downstairs and play the loving husband while they planned my demise. "Be right down," I called back. "Just finishing up this call." I waited until her footsteps retreated, then moved to my dresser and pulled out the small digital recorder I used for client interviews. Old habits from my forensics training. Always document everything. If they wanted to play games with evidence and narratives, they'd chosen the wrong target. I'd spent 6 years in military intelligence and another 4 running background investigations for corporate clients. I knew how to build a case, and I knew how to tear one apart. The voices downstairs had moved to the kitchen, their conversation shifting to safer topics now that they assumed I might overhear. I slipped the recorder into my shirt pocket and headed down to join my loving family. Raina looked up from the stove with her practiced smile. She was 62, silver-haired, and had spent 3 decades perfecting the art of looking concerned while calculating the angles. Cedric, dear, you look tired. Have you been sleeping? Fine, thanks. I took my usual seat at the kitchen table, noting how Jared positioned himself between me and the back door. Subtle. Just busy with work. Still doing those security consultations? Jared asked. He was 35, 2 years older than Kira, with the soft build of someone who'd spent his career in financial planning rather than anything requiring physical effort. I heard the government contracts are drying up in your field. Of course he'd heard that. He'd probably helped make it happen. The market fluctuates, I said, but I've got steady clients. Kira set a plate in front of me, her hand briefly touching my shoulder. The same touch that had once made me feel loved now felt like a predator marking territory. You've seemed stressed lately. Maybe you should talk to someone. I've been talking to Brent, I said, watching their faces. He's been very helpful. Raina and Jared exchanged a glance so quick I almost missed it. Almost. Brent's a good friend, Kira said. He cares about you. Sure he did. Cared enough to violate doctor-patient confidentiality and feed my psychological evaluations to my wife's family. I wondered what else he'd shared. My concerns about Kira's behavior after the accident, my questions about her medical records, my growing suspicion that something wasn't right in my marriage. All of it probably documented and twisted into evidence of my deteriorating mental state. Have you given any more thought to taking a vacation? Raina asked. Somewhere restful, maybe a driving trip through the mountains. A driving trip. How thoughtful. Lots of opportunities for accidents on mountain roads. I might, I said, when the timing's right. We ate in relative quiet after that, the conversation turning to local gossip and Jared's latest client acquisitions. Normal family dinner talk, if you ignored the undercurrent of conspiracy and murder planning. I excused myself after dessert, claiming I needed to prepare for tomorrow's calls. Instead, I went to my home office and started documenting everything I could remember from the conversation I'd overheard: names, dates, specific phrases. Then I opened my laptop and began the process I'd used countless times in military intelligence, building a target profile. Only this time, the targets were my wife and her family, and they had no idea they'd just declared war on someone who knew how to fight back. I waited until Tuesday morning to start my real investigation. Kira had left for her job at Hartford Insurance, where she worked as a claims adjuster specializing in personal injury cases. The irony wasn't lost on me. My first stop was our home cloud storage. Kira had insisted we share everything digitally for convenience: bank accounts, photos, documents, email backups. She'd said it was about trust and transparency in our marriage. Now I realized it was about surveillance. But surveillance works both ways when you know what you're looking for. I started with the deleted files. Most people think hitting delete actually removes something from their computer. In reality, it just marks the space as available for new data. Until something overwrites those sectors, everything remains recoverable with the right tools. I'd learned data recovery techniques during my military service, hunting for intelligence in damaged hard drives and corrupted databases. The skills transferred perfectly to domestic espionage. The first thing I found was a group chat thread that had been active for 14 months. Participants: Kira, Raina, Jared, and someone listed as DT Drake Torin. The earliest messages dated back to 3 months before Kira's accident. Raina: insurance policies are in place. Accidental injury coverage is substantial. Jared: Brent confirms C is showing signs of stress. Work performance declining. Kira: he's been asking questions about my medical appointments, getting suspicious. DT: need more time to establish the leak narrative. Military investigation takes months to develop. My hands trembled as I scrolled through message after message detailing the systematic destruction of my life. They'd been planning this for over a year. The most damning exchange had occurred 2 weeks before Kira's supposed accident. Kira. Ready to move forward. Hospital contact confirmed. Reina. Remember, traumatic brain injury symptoms can persist for months. Play it conservatively. DT. Once the military angle develops, we can accelerate timeline for C. Jared. Brent has him scheduled for psychological evaluation next month. Perfect opportunity to document deteriorating mental state. I screenshot every message and saved them to an encrypted drive I kept for sensitive client work. Then I kept digging. In Kira's email archives, I found correspondence with a personal injury lawyer discussing ongoing complications from vehicular trauma. The lawyer was advising her on maximizing her insurance settlement by documenting long-term cognitive effects. There were also emails with Drake going back 2 years, not the casual correspondence of former friends, but intimate messages between active lovers. They'd never broken up. Their relationship had simply gone underground when Kira decided to marry me. One email from 6 months ago made my stomach turn. Can't wait until this is over and we can be together openly. C is so trusting, it's almost sad. But the insurance money and his security clearance access make this worth the wait. I'd been a mark from the beginning, a target selected for my professional credentials and financial assets. My phone rang, interrupting my research. Brent Marrow's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, Ced, how are you feeling today?" Even his voice sounded different now that I knew what he was really doing. Less concerned friend, more data collector. "I'm fine, Brent, just working." "That's good to hear. Listen, I wanted to follow up on our conversation last week. You mentioned having some concerns about Kira's recovery. Last week, I'd confided in him about Kira's behavior seeming inconsistent with her supposed injuries, how she moved normally when she thought I wasn't watching, how her memory problems only seemed to affect convenient topics. I think I was just being paranoid, I said. Paranoia can be a sign of stress-related mental health issues, Brent replied. Have you considered talking to a professional counselor? Maybe. I'll think about it. I could make some recommendations. People who specialize in trauma and adjustment disorders. People who would document my supposed instability for his reports to Kira's family. Thanks, Brent. I'll let you know. After ending the call, I returned to my investigation with renewed focus. If they wanted to play psychological warfare, I needed to understand the full scope of their operation. I found financial records showing payments from Jared's consulting firm to Brent's company. $50,000 over the past 8 months, categorized as psychological services consulting. Brent was being paid to spy on me. There were also records of payments to someone named Marcus Chen at Millbrook General Hospital, the same hospital where Kira had been treated after her accident. Chen worked in medical records. They'd bought themselves inside access to falsify her treatment documentation. My phone buzzed with a text from Kira. Working late tonight? Client dinner? Don't wait up. Client dinner. Right. I checked her location sharing, which she'd insisted we activate for safety reasons. Her phone was at the Riverside Hotel downtown, the same hotel where Drake Torrin was registered, according to the guest list I'd just hacked from their reservation system. While my wife was maintaining her cover story, I decided to do some field reconnaissance. The Riverside Hotel sat on the banks of the Connecticut River, a restored 19th century building that catered to business travelers and affluent locals. I parked across the street and settled in to watch. At 7:30, Kira's BMW pulled into the valet area. She stepped out wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd never suffered traumatic brain injury. Drake emerged from the hotel lobby to greet her. He was tall, athletic, with the kind of polished appearance that came from expensive grooming and regular gym membership. Everything I wasn't, according to the narrative they'd been building about our failing marriage. They embraced like lovers, not like former friends offering comfort during a difficult time. I activated the camera on my phone and began recording. If they wanted to document evidence, I could play that game too. They disappeared into the hotel restaurant, and I settled in for a long surveillance session. This was familiar work from my military days, watching targets and gathering intelligence. The only difference was the personal stakes. Around 9 o'clock, they moved from the restaurant to the hotel bar. I repositioned my car to maintain visual contact through the large windows facing the street. At 10:15, they left the bar together and headed for the elevators. I waited another hour before driving home. Kira's car remained in the hotel parking lot. Back in my office, I uploaded the surveillance photos and added them to my growing evidence file. Then I returned to the recovered chat messages, looking for operational details I might have missed. What I found was a timeline. According to their messages, the plan had 3 phases. Phase 1 was establishing my psychological instability and isolating me from my support network. Phase 2 was Drake's articles implicating me as the source of leaked military intelligence. Phase 3 was my accident and their assumption of control over my assets through conservatorship proceedings. Phase 1 was nearly complete. My security clearance was under review due to concerns about my mental state. My military contacts had been systematically poisoned against me through rumors and Brent's professional assessments. My consulting business was struggling as clients received anonymous tips about my reliability issues. Phase 2 was already underway. Drake's articles about drone program failures were gaining national attention. The leaked documents he'd obtained through Kira's access to my home office contained details that only someone with my clearance level would know. Phase 3 was scheduled to begin within the next month. They'd planned everything except for one critical factor. I'd discovered their operation before they could complete it. Now, it was time to turn the tables. I opened a new document and began planning my own 3-phase operation. Phase 1 would be intelligence gathering and preparation. Phase 2 would be turning their own weapons against them. Phase 3 would be total exposure and destruction of their conspiracy. But first, I needed to maintain my cover, play the confused, increasingly unstable husband while I built my case. Kira came home at midnight, slipping into bed beside me and whispering apologies about the late client dinner. I pretended to be asleep and listened to her breathing settle into the rhythm of someone with a clear conscience. Tomorrow, I would begin dismantling their lives with the same methodical precision they'd used to destroy mine. Wednesday morning brought the first test of my acting abilities. Kira made coffee and toast, chattering about her busy day ahead while I read the news on my tablet. "Oh, did you see this article about military contractors?" she asked, pointing to her phone screen. "That journalist Drake Torin has been writing about intelligence leaks. Wasn't he in your program at some point?" She was fishing, trying to gauge my reaction to Drake's latest piece. The article detailed failures in drone targeting that had resulted in civilian casualties, citing anonymous sources with access to classified operational data. "I don't think we overlapped," I said. "But yeah, this kind of leak investigation is serious business. They'll probably polygraph everyone with access to those files." Kira's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "Polygraph?" "Standard procedure for this level of breach. They'll want to eliminate all possible sources." I kept my voice casual while watching her face. "Could take months to resolve. Anyone under investigation usually loses their clearance pending the outcome." "That seems harsh." "National security doesn't mess around." I folded the tablet and stood up. I should probably give my security officer a heads up that I might get called in for questioning. "Why would you be questioned?" Perfect. She was trying to sound concerned rather than calculating, but I could see the wheels turning. If I contacted my security officer proactively, it might complicate their timeline. "I've worked on similar programs. They'll want to verify I haven't had any unusual contacts or security incidents." I kissed her forehead, noting how she tensed at the gesture. "Nothing to worry about, just routine." I left for my office downtown, but instead of going to work, I drove to the Millbrook Police Department. My friend Tony Castellano had joined the force after his army discharge, and he owed me a favor from our deployment days. "Said, good to see you," Tony said, leading me to a small conference room. "What's on your mind?" "I need advice about a domestic situation, hypothetically speaking." Tony raised an eyebrow but nodded for me to continue. "If someone suspected their spouse was committing insurance fraud, what would be the proper way to report it?" "Depends on the type of fraud. Medical, auto, property." "Medical. Falsified injury claims, fabricated treatment records." "That's a felony in Massachusetts. Insurance fraud unit would handle the investigation." Tony leaned forward. "This isn't hypothetical, is it?" "I'm still gathering information, but if I had documented evidence, recorded conversations, financial records, medical discrepancies, what would be the process?" "You'd need substantial proof. Insurance companies investigate suspicious claims, but they usually focus on the money trail. Proving intent to defraud requires showing deliberate deception." "What about conspiracy charges, if multiple people were involved?" "That's federal territory if it crosses state lines or involves substantial amounts. FBI would take the lead." Tony studied my face. "Said, are you in some kind of trouble?" "Not yet, but I might be soon." I thanked Tony and drove to my actual office, a small suite in a converted mill building, where I ran my security consulting business. I had 3 active clients and a stack of background investigation requests that I'd been neglecting while dealing with my domestic crisis. But today, I had different priorities. I used my office's secure internet connection to research Marcus Chen, the medical records clerk at Millbrook General. Public records showed he'd been employed there for 2 years, with a previous job at a hospital in Hartford that had terminated him for policy violations. A deeper dive into his social media revealed expensive purchases that didn't match his salary. New car, designer clothes, frequent trips to Atlantic City casinos. Someone with access to medical records and a taste for money he couldn't afford. Perfect target for recruitment by Jared's operation. I also researched Drake Torrin's background. His journalism credentials were legitimate, but his financial situation was precarious. Freelance defense reporting didn't pay well, and he had substantial student loan debt, plus a recent bankruptcy filing. Another recruit motivated by money rather than principle. My phone rang. Kira. "Hi, honey. How's your day going?" "Busy. Client meetings." "I was thinking about what you said this morning, about the security investigation. Maybe you should be proactive and contact them first." She was pushing the timeline. They wanted me to voluntarily put myself under investigation, which would accelerate the process of destroying my clearance and credibility. "I'll think about it. It might look suspicious if you wait until they contact you." "Maybe, but it might also look suspicious if I volunteer for questioning when I haven't done anything wrong." Silence on the line. I could practically hear her calculating. "I'm just worried about you," she finally said. "I know. I appreciate that." After ending the call, I returned to my research. I needed more than just evidence of their conspiracy. I needed leverage. The breakthrough came when I found Raina Favren's financial records. As Kira's mother, she'd been listed as an emergency contact on several of Kira's accounts, which gave me legal access through our joint account management system. Raina had been making regular payments to a private investigator named William Kozlov. The payments had started 18 months ago, right around the time their conspiracy began. Kozlov specialized in asset investigation and background research. They'd hired him to profile me before implementing their plan, but Kozlov had also been investigating other targets. His client list included 3 other women, all married to men with substantial assets or valuable professional credentials. Raina was running multiple operations. This wasn't just about destroying my life. It was a business model. I spent the afternoon documenting everything I'd discovered, building a comprehensive case file that detailed the conspiracy's structure, timeline, and participants. Then I began planning my counterattack. The key was turning their own tactics against them. They'd been using my trust and emotional attachment to manipulate me. Now I would use their greed and overconfidence to destroy them. I started with Marcus Chen. Using my security consulting credentials, I contacted Millbrook General's Human Resources Department and reported suspicious activity in their medical records system. Anonymous tip about potential HIPAA violations and falsified documentation. The investigation would take weeks to complete, but it would put Chen under scrutiny and potentially expose his arrangement with Jared's operation. Next, I contacted the Massachusetts Insurance Fraud Bureau and filed a detailed report about Kira's suspicious claim. I provided documentation of her inconsistent behavior, the financial connections between her family and various conspirators, and evidence of her ongoing relationship with Drake. The investigation would be confidential initially, giving me time to gather additional evidence before they became aware of the inquiry. Finally, I sent an anonymous tip to Drake's editor at Defense Weekly, detailing his financial connections to Jared's consulting firm and suggesting that his sources might be compromised by personal relationships rather than principled whistleblowing. By the time I left my office, I'd initiated 3 separate investigations that would systematically dismantle their operation. But I wasn't finished. That evening, I attended the weekly gathering at Murphy's Tavern, a local bar where many of the area's veterans met for informal socializing. Brent Marrow was usually there, holding court with stories from his contractor days. Tonight, I planned to give him something new to talk about. "Ced, how are you holding up?" Brent asked when I joined his table. "You seemed stressed when we talked yesterday." "Actually, I'm feeling much better. I think you were right about needing to talk to someone." "Oh? Did you contact a counselor?" "Not yet, but I had an interesting conversation with my security officer today." Brent's beer glass paused halfway to his mouth. "About what?" "The Drake Torrin investigation. Apparently they're looking into how he obtained those classified documents. Turns out they can trace digital access pretty precisely these days." "Is that so?" "Yeah. They're particularly interested in anyone who might have had personal relationships with potential sources, family members, friends, romantic connections." I took a sip of my beer. "They're even looking at people who might have had access to sources' psychological evaluations or personal information." Brent's face had gone pale. "That seems like a broad investigation." "National security investigations usually are. They cast a wide net and see what they catch." I stood up. "Anyway, I should get home. Kira worries when I'm out late." I left Brent sitting at the table, staring into his beer and contemplating the walls closing in around him. The drive home gave me time to think about the next phase of my operation. I'd planted seeds of doubt and initiated official investigations, but I needed more direct action to accelerate their downfall. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of turning them against each other. Because the best way to destroy a conspiracy is to make the conspirators destroy themselves. Thursday morning, I implemented the next phase of my counterattack. While Kira showered, I used her laptop to send an encrypted message to Drake from her email account. "Need to meet today. Brent is asking questions about our timeline. Think C might be more suspicious than we thought." Then I deleted the message from her sent folder and closed the laptop. An hour later, while Kira was at work, I received a call from an unknown number. "Kira?" It was Drake's voice. "Sorry, wrong number," I said, and hung up. He'd taken the bait. Now he was trying to contact Kira directly, probably panicking about the message. When she didn't answer his calls or respond to his texts, his paranoia would escalate. I drove to Hartford Insurance and positioned myself in the parking garage, where I could observe the building entrance. At 11:30, Drake's black sedan pulled into the visitor parking area. He was coming to see Kira in person, which meant their communication protocols were breaking down under pressure. I followed him into the building lobby, staying far enough back to avoid detection. Drake approached the reception desk and asked for Kira Fallon. The receptionist made a call, then directed him to the elevators. Perfect. Their secret meeting in her workplace would be documented by the building's security cameras. While Drake was upstairs, I returned to my car and called Kira's direct office line. Cedric Fallon, Claims Department. Hi, this is Detective Morrison with the Millbrook Police Department. I'm calling about a case that might involve one of your claims. Do you have a few minutes to discuss claim number HI2847R? That was Kira's own claim number, which I'd found in her insurance paperwork. What kind of case? Insurance fraud investigation. We're working with your company's fraud prevention unit. Can you confirm the status of this claim? I'm not sure I should discuss ongoing claims without speaking to my supervisor. Of course. Could you transfer me to your fraud prevention department? Hold on. I hung up before the transfer completed. The goal wasn't to conduct an actual investigation, but to make Kira aware that her claim was under scrutiny. She would assume that Drake's unexpected visit had somehow triggered police attention. I waited in the parking garage until Drake emerged from the building 20 minutes later. His body language suggested the meeting hadn't gone well. He walked quickly to his car, checking over his shoulder repeatedly. Phase 2 of the psychological pressure campaign was working. That afternoon, I visited Jared's office in downtown Hartford. His financial consulting firm occupied half a floor in a modern glass building, with Jared's name prominently displayed on the directory. I told the receptionist I was interested in investment planning services and had been referred by a mutual friend. She scheduled me for a consultation the following week, but the real purpose of my visit was to plant surveillance equipment. While waiting in the lobby, I attached a small GPS tracker to the underside of Jared's BMW in the parking garage. I also installed a wireless listening device in the men's restroom near his office, positioned where it could pick up phone conversations from the adjacent conference room. The devices were military surplus from my consulting inventory, originally designed for corporate security investigations. By Thursday evening, I had established surveillance on all the main conspirators and initiated multiple pressure points designed to make them panic and turn against each other. The results were immediate. My listening device picked up a heated phone conversation between Jared and Raina at 6:15 p.m. Told you bringing Drake here was a mistake, Jared was saying. Now Kira's panicking about police investigations. The timeline is too advanced to abort now, Raina replied. We've invested too much money and effort. Money doesn't matter if we all end up in prison. Calm down. Kira's just being paranoid. There's no actual police investigation. How can you be sure? Because if there was, they would have contacted us directly. This is probably just Cedric trying to gather information. What if he knows more than we thought? Then we accelerate the timeline. Drake's article comes out next week, and we implement the accident scenario immediately after. Brent says Cedric's psychological evaluation shows increasing instability. We might not need the accident if we can get him committed for psychiatric treatment. That's a backup plan. The accident scenario provides better legal cover and insurance benefits. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, detailing their contingency plans and revised timeline. They were moving up their schedule, which meant I had less time to complete my counterattack. But their panic was also creating opportunities. I spent Thursday night reviewing all the intelligence I'd gathered and planning the final phase of my operation. The evidence I'd collected was substantial, but I needed to present it in a way that would maximize the damage to their conspiracy while protecting myself from their accelerated timeline. Friday morning, I put the plan into action. First, I contacted William Kozloff, the private investigator Raina had hired to profile me. I told him I was a potential client interested in asset protection services and arranged a meeting for that afternoon. Then I called Marcus Chen at Millbrook General and posed as a reporter investigating medical record security. I mentioned that I'd received tips about falsified documentation and wanted to give him an opportunity to comment before publication. Chen hung up immediately, but the call would increase his paranoia and potentially cause him to contact Jared's operation. Finally, I sent anonymous packages to Drake's editor, the Massachusetts Insurance Fraud Bureau, and the FBI field office in Boston. Each package contained copies of the evidence I'd gathered, along with detailed timelines and financial documentation. The packages were mailed from different post offices using untraceable methods I'd learned during my military intelligence training. By Friday afternoon, multiple investigations would be underway, and the conspirators would be facing pressure from several directions simultaneously. The meeting with Kozlov took place at a coffee shop near his office. He was a thin, nervous man in his 50s who specialized in what he called domestic asset research. "What kind of protection are you looking for?" he asked. "I'm concerned about my wife's family. I think they might be planning to challenge my financial assets." Kozlov's expression shifted slightly. "What makes you think that?" "Suspicious behavior, questions about my insurance policies, conversations that stop when I enter the room. That could be innocent family concern." "Maybe, but I'd like to know for sure. Could you investigate their activities? Financial records, communication patterns, professional associations?" "That would be expensive, and potentially complicated if they're already working with someone in my field." "What do you mean?" Kozlov realized he'd said too much. "Nothing specific. I just meant that domestic investigations can get complicated when multiple parties are involved." "Have you worked with my wife's family before?" "I can't discuss other clients. Even if those clients were planning to defraud me?" Kozlov stood up abruptly. "I think this meeting is over." "Sit down, Mr. Kozlov. We're not finished." Something in my voice made him hesitate. Military command presence, honed by years of giving orders that people followed without question. "You've been investigating me for Reina Favren for the past 18 months, I continued. "Asset profiles, psychological assessments, security vulnerabilities. You helped them plan their operation." "I don't know what you're talking about." "I have copies of your reports, financial records showing payments from Jared Solis's firm, documentation of your surveillance activities." I leaned forward. "You're already implicated in a federal conspiracy investigation." Kozlov's face went white. "What do you want?" "Information. About their other targets. About their operational methods. About their timeline." "I can't. You can cooperate with me now, or you can explain everything to federal investigators later. Your choice." Kozlov looked around the coffee shop, calculating his options. Finally, he pulled out a small notebook. "There are 4 active operations," he said quietly. "Your wife's family has been running this for 3 years. They target men with valuable assets or professional credentials, usually through romantic relationships or family connections." "How many successful operations?" 2 completed. Substantial settlements in both cases. The targets never realized they'd been manipulated." "What about the current operations?" "Yours is the most advanced. The others are still in early stages." I spent another hour extracting details about Reina's criminal enterprise. It was more extensive than I'd realized, with connections to corrupt medical professionals, compromised insurance adjusters, and a network of accomplices across 3 states. When the meeting ended, I had enough information to destroy not just my wife's conspiracy, but the entire criminal organization they were part of. But first, I had to survive their accelerated timeline. According to Kozlov, they were planning to implement my accident scenario within the next week. Time was running out. Saturday morning, Kira announced she was going shopping with her mother. "Girls' day out," she said, kissing my cheek with the same false affection she'd been displaying for months. I knew better. The GPS tracker on Jared's car showed all 3 of them meeting at his office, despite it being the weekend. They were finalizing their plans. While they held their crisis meeting, I prepared for the endgame. I drove to a storage unit I'd rented under a false name, where I'd been accumulating evidence and preparing contingency plans. Inside were copies of all the documents I'd gathered, backup drives containing surveillance footage, and equipment I'd need for the final confrontation. I also retrieved a small device I'd hoped I wouldn't need to use. A GPS tracker with an embedded panic button that would alert emergency services if activated. Military surplus gear designed for deep cover operations. If their accident scenario went forward, I wanted to ensure someone would find my body quickly enough to determine the cause. But I wasn't planning to be a victim. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at Murphy's Tavern tonight. 8 p.m., come alone. B. Brent was requesting a private meeting. Either he was planning to warn me, or he was setting me up for their accident scenario. I texted back, "See you there." Then I began preparing for both possibilities. At 7:30, I arrived at Murphy's Tavern and positioned myself at a table with clear sightlines to all entrances. The Saturday night crowd provided good cover, but also created potential complications if things went wrong. Brent arrived precisely at 8, looking nervous and constantly checking his phone. He ordered a beer and sat across from me. Said, "We need to talk." "I'm listening." "You're in danger. Kira's family is planning something, and I've been feeding them information about you." "I know." Brent's beer glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "You know?" "I've known for weeks. The question is whether you're here to help me or to set me up for whatever they're planning next." "Help you, I swear. This whole thing got out of control, and I didn't realize how far they were willing to go until today." "What happened today?" "Jared offered me $50,000 to falsify a psychological evaluation recommending involuntary commitment. They want to have you declared mentally incompetent." "And?" I told him no. That's when he mentioned their backup plan. Brent leaned forward. "They're going to stage a car accident tomorrow night on Route 202 near Miller's Curve." Miller's Curve was a notorious accident site where the road curved sharply around a steep hillside. Poor visibility, no guardrails, and a 100-foot drop to the river below. "How?" "They've been tracking your movements. Tomorrow you're supposed to receive an emergency call about a family member in the hospital. When you drive to Hartford, they'll force you off the road at the curve." "Who's doing the forcing?" "Jared hired someone. Professional job supposed to look like an accident." I studied Brent's face, looking for signs of deception. His fear seemed genuine, but he'd been lying to me for months. "Why are you warning me now?" "Because I never signed up for murder. Insurance fraud is one thing, but this—" He shook his head. "I can't be part of it." "What do you want in return?" "Immunity. I'll testify against them if you can guarantee I won't be prosecuted." "I can't guarantee anything, but cooperation would probably help your situation." Brent nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing. Go home, act normal, and wait for instructions. If they contact you about my psychological state after tomorrow night, tell them you're concerned about the ethics of the situation and need time to think." "That's it?" "That's it. Don't contact them, don't change your behavior, and don't try to warn them that I know." After Brent left, I sat in the tavern for another hour, refining my plan. They'd given me a 24-hour timeline and detailed information about their method. Now I could turn their own trap against them. Sunday morning, I drove to Miller's Curve and conducted a tactical assessment of the area. The road was isolated with dense woods on both sides and limited cell phone coverage. Perfect for an accident scenario, but also perfect for what I had planned. I identified 3 positions where I could place surveillance cameras to document whatever happened at the curve. I also located a spot where I could park my car out of sight while maintaining visual contact with the road. Most importantly, I found an alternate route that would let me approach the area from an unexpected direction. That afternoon, I made my preparations. I installed the surveillance cameras, tested the communication equipment, and positioned emergency supplies at strategic locations. Then I went home and waited for their call. It came at 7:15 p.m. "Cedric?" It was a woman's voice I didn't recognize. "This is Nurse Patterson at Hartford General Hospital. Your brother-in-law, Jared Solis, has been in an accident. He's asking for you." Jared didn't have any siblings, so I was definitely not his brother-in-law. But they were counting on panic and confusion to prevent me from thinking clearly. How serious is it? Critical condition. You should come immediately. I'll be right there. I hung up and called Kira. Honey, I just got a call about Jared. He's been in an accident. Oh my God, how bad? Her acting was terrible. She already knew about the supposed accident because she'd helped plan it. Critical condition. I'm driving to Hartford now. I'll meet you there. No, stay home. I'll call you when I know more. Are you sure? I'm sure. I left the house at 7:30, driving my normal route toward Hartford. But instead of continuing to Miller's Curve, I turned off onto a back road that circled around to my surveillance position. At 8:15, a dark SUV took position in the woods near the curve. At 8:30, Jared's BMW arrived and parked on the opposite side of the road. They were in position for their ambush. At 8:45, my car appeared on the road, driving toward the curve at normal speed. Except I wasn't in it. I'd rigged the vehicle with a remote control system using equipment from my security consulting inventory. The car would drive itself through the curve while I watched from a safe distance. The dark SUV pulled out behind my empty car, accelerating aggressively. At the sharpest part of the curve, it rammed the rear bumper, sending my car off the road and down the hillside. Perfect documentation of attempted murder. But they weren't finished. Jared emerged from his BMW and walked to the edge of the road, looking down at my crashed car. The SUV driver joined him, and they had a brief conversation before the SUV departed. Jared then called 911 to report the accident he'd just witnessed. I waited until the emergency responders arrived and began their investigation. Then I called Detective Morrison at the Millbrook Police Department. Detective Morrison, this is Cedric Fallon. I need to report an attempted murder. Mr. Fallon, I thought you were in a car accident. That's what they wanted you to think. I have video evidence of the entire operation. An hour later, I met Morrison and 2 FBI agents at the police station. I provided them with copies of all the evidence I'd gathered: the recorded conversations, financial documentation, surveillance footage, and witness statements from Brent and Kozlov. The investigation moved quickly after that. Jared was arrested at the accident scene when investigators found inconsistencies in his witness statement. The SUV driver was identified through traffic cameras and arrested at his home. Drake was taken into custody at the Riverside Hotel, where he was found with classified documents and evidence of his financial relationship with the conspiracy. Kira was arrested at our house, where she was waiting for news of my tragic accident. Rena was arrested at her home, along with Marcus Chen and 2 other accomplices. The entire conspiracy unraveled in less than 24 hours. Monday morning, I sat in the FBI field office in Boston, providing detailed testimony about the conspiracy that had nearly cost me my life. Agent Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus, was leading the investigation. This is one of the most comprehensive domestic conspiracy cases we've seen, she said. Your documentation is extraordinary. Military training. I was taught to be thorough. The evidence you've provided will support charges of conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, identity theft, and racketeering. We're looking at federal sentences of 20 to 30 years for the primary conspirators. What about Brent Marrow? His cooperation will be taken into consideration, probably 5 to 10 years, depending on his testimony. I spent 3 hours walking through the timeline and evidence with federal investigators. The case was so well documented that they expected guilty pleas from most of the defendants. Kira's family had made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated their target. Tuesday morning, I attended Kira's arraignment hearing. She looked smaller in her orange jumpsuit, less confident without her carefully constructed facade. When she saw me in the courtroom, her expression shifted from surprise to rage to something that might have been regret. Her lawyer requested bail, but the prosecutor argued that she was a flight risk with access to hidden assets. Bail was denied. As the bailiff led her away, Kira turned back toward me. I loved you, she said. No, I replied. You loved what I could provide. There's a difference. That afternoon, I met with my lawyer to discuss the divorce proceedings. With Kira facing federal charges, the process would be expedited. She'll probably try to claim that she was coerced by her family, my lawyer said. Diminished responsibility due to family pressure. The evidence shows she was a willing participant from the beginning. I agree. But her defense team will try every angle they can find. Let them try. I have recordings of her planning my murder. The divorce was finalized within 6 weeks. I retained all marital assets, plus damages for fraud and emotional distress. But the legal victory felt hollow compared to the personal cost. I'd spent 8 years of my life with someone who'd been planning to destroy me almost from the beginning. Every shared moment, every expression of love, every intimate conversation had been part of an elaborate deception. The trust I'd once felt for other people was gone, probably permanently. 3 months later, I sold the house in Millbrook and moved to a small town in Vermont where nobody knew my story. I kept my security consulting business, but focused on corporate clients rather than domestic investigations. I had no interest in uncovering anyone else's secrets. The trial began 6 months after the arrests. I testified for 2 days, walking the jury through the evidence and explaining how the conspiracy had operated. Kira's defense team tried to portray her as a victim of her family's manipulation, but the recorded conversations made it clear that she'd been an active participant in planning my destruction. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Kira received 25 years in federal prison. Jared got 30 years. Raina got life without parole due to her leadership role in multiple conspiracies. Drake received 15 years for his role in the classified document theft and conspiracy charges. Brent Marrow received 7 years in exchange for his cooperation. The other accomplices received sentences ranging from 5 to 12 years. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel like victory. A year later, I received a letter from Kira in prison. She wanted to apologize and explain her actions. I burned the letter without reading it. Some secrets are better left buried, but mine needed to be exposed for everyone to see. I wrote this account not for sympathy or vindication, but as a warning. There are people in the world who view other human beings as resources to be exploited. They're skilled at manipulation, patient in their planning, and ruthless in their execution. The only defense is vigilance. Trust, but verify. Love, but protect yourself. And remember that the person sleeping next to you might be your greatest enemy. I learned that lesson the hard way. Now I sleep alone, in a house with excellent security systems, in a town where everyone minds their own business. It's not the life I planned, but it's the life I chose after discovering the truth about the people I'd trusted most. No more secrets, no more lies, no more victims. The conspiracy that nearly destroyed me is finished, and its architects are paying the price for their crimes. But the scars remain. Some wounds never fully heal. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some secrets once revealed change everything forever. This is my story. This is my truth. This is what happens when you discover that your entire life has been built on lies. And this is what justice looks like when you have the skills and determination to fight back against people who think you're helpless. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about everything. And now they have 20